I want to thank the chair and ranking member and also the panel. Mr. Silver, one of the requirements of Dodd-Frank was publicizing the ratio of CEO pay to median worker for publicly traded firms. I just want to point out that back in 1980, when I was a sophomore in high school, the ratio was about 42 to 1. In 2014, CEOs receive about 373 times the average employee. I guess my question to you is, why is this important knowledge for investors? And how does this knowledge further our discussion of addressing economic stability and even equity?
What that information is about, obviously, is internal equity within the firm. And there is a substantial body of research, most recently developed in focusing on retail stores, that suggests that there's a correlation between essentially internal equity within the firm and long-term firm performance. Contrary to what my colleague on the panel, Mr. Atkins, suggests, the securities laws from their very inception were designed to ensure that the public had material information about the management of public corporations. It's very clear the public would very much like to know this, what this ratio is, and know it accurately for all public companies. But the more fundamental question is, it's the law of the land. This Congress passed that statute, and the public's entitled to have it enforced, which it hasn't been so far. In terms of the larger issue of economic stability, underneath the economic crisis of 2000 that began in 2007 was a generation of wage stagnation. It created the political and economic circumstances in which a wide variety of people in both parties were tempted to substitute credit for wages. I think if you listen closely to my colleague Professor Zywicki's testimony, he's in favor of that kind of substitution. I'm not. I think that substitution profoundly destabilized our economy and threatened not just our long-term prosperity, but it threatens us with repeated and increasing severity of financial crises. The pay ratio rule is designed to put valuable information in the hands of both investors and the public that is relevant to that problem.
You know, Mr. Silver, I just also want to ask for unanimous consent to introduce into the record an article from Forbes dated June 16, 2014, which says the highest paid CEOs are the worst performers.
Without objections.
Yeah, so there you go. I'd also like to point out, just for the record too, that the reality about mortgage loans made during the financial crisis and prior to it, about 66% of the loans were equity stripping refinances. And these were cash out refinancing of homeowners with substantial equity, too often loans with predatory terms. I just want to point that out as well. And Mr. Zywicki, I wonder if I could ask you a question, sir. In your testimony, you complain or you point out that the CFPB is engaged in massive data mining program. You say it collects data from hundreds of millions of consumers and credit records, which, quote, far exceed any reasonable regulatory purpose, unquote. And then you cite Mr. Newt Gingrich in a footnote to support your claim. Are you aware that Mr. Gingrich is on retainer from the U.S. Consumer Coalition?
I cited that because
Are you aware?
No, I wasn't aware. But
are you aware that that's a 501c4 organization, which, according to its founder Brian Wise, is dedicated to trying to undermine the CFPB? Did you know that?
I'm not aware of that.
I just want to know. So you cited a source, and you don't know the terms upon which that citation was made.
I do know the terms because I know those data are accurate because I've seen similar numbers elsewhere, and I just cited that as the most immediate
You cited Gingrich. You didn't mention that he was paid by the U.S. Consumer Coalition, did you?
No,
Did you
I
mention
didn't know
he was compensated for his advocacy? No, you didn't mention that.
No, but the data's out there, and
Yeah.
the data has been reported elsewhere. That was just the
So a
most recent site.
compensated source to advocate a particular line of argument, you don't think it was worth the public's time to know that? No, you don't. Okay, my time's over. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has
No
expired.
further questions for this witness.